Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm gonna carry on reading Cara the Class Clown, just a few chapters. It's written by Lydia di Giulio, Bridget di Giulio. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 6, The New School. Cara's new school was a short walk from home. It was located underneath a log that was part of the sandpit frame at the local school. Mrs. Cornelia was her new classroom teacher. Everyone, can I have your attention, please? Mrs. Cornelia called out to the class. Raise your wing if you would like to have your first flying lesson today, she asked enthusiastically. Yes, please, the class replied as 20 wings shot up into the air, including Cara's. Okay then. Great! Let's begin by flapping our wings gently, instructed Mrs. Cornelia, who was standing at the front of the class demonstrating each of the steps involved. All of the little cockroaches carefully copied the teacher. Great job, Clovis! You're doing really well, she commented. Clarabelle, try to lift your wings a little higher before you start flapping them. Yes, that's much better. Keep going. Flappy little faster. That's it. Perfect, said Mrs. Cornelia. Just then, she turned around to look at Cara and said, Well done, Cara. Keep up the good work, won't you? Yes, Mrs. Cornelia, of course I will, answered Cara. But since most of the little cockroaches were experiencing some difficulties with their technique, Mrs. Cornelia decided to gather the class together. All of the little cockroaches sat in the corner of the room and watch their teacher demonstrate a few of the steps that were having trouble with. Forgetting all about her previous intention to be good, Cara came up with a plan that she simply couldn't wait to implement. Sneaking away from the group unnoticed, she slowly made her way towards the corridor where her school bag was, quickly taking out some honey that her mother had packed her for recess. Cara headed back to the classroom with the honey carefully tucked away underneath her wings. To everyone's surprise, Cara suddenly began to do a ballet dance right in front of them, wearing a huge grin on her face. All of the little cockroaches giggled as they watched Cara twirling around the room like a real ballerina, performing a special ballet dance solely for their entertainment. Also, they thought everyone was so busy watching Cara's performance that they didn't notice the sticky honey that was being coated all over the floor. Cara, what on earth are you doing? Asked Mrs. Cornelia, trying not to giggle. You look ridiculous. I'm just practicing my ballet, replied Cara. I'm quite good, don't you think? Cara, it's a flying lesson, not a dance lesson. Cara, this is a flying lesson, not a dance class, reminded Mrs. Cornelia. Now please, come and join the rest of us. Yes, Mrs. Cornelia, replied Cara, beaming. I'm ready to join you now. Chapter 7, The Sticky Flying Lesson. Little cockroaches, said Mrs. Cornelia, addressing the class. I am quite pleased with your progress so far. I do believe that we're now get ready to progress to the next stage, which is learning how to take off and land safely. So let's begin, shall we? All of the little cockroaches stood up and flapped their wings excitedly, except for Cara, who carefully made her way to the back of the room, chuckling to herself. Now, on the count of 1, instructed Mrs. Cornelia, I would like you all to take a few steps backwards. On the count of 2, run forwards, flapping your wings, and on the count of 3, jump up into the air. None of you should really experience any more problems, provided that you all carefully follow the steps that I have just outlined. Okay, let's get ready then. 1, 2, 3, and up we go! But unfortunately, instead of everyone taking off into the air, most of the little cockroaches ended up face down on the floor, including poor Mrs. Cornelia. Cara couldn't stop giggling. She thought that her classmates and teacher looked so funny lying on the floor with her wings spread out, covered in honey. Tirelessly, Mrs. Cornelia tried to get up several times, but without making success. Eventually, however, she managed to heave herself up and free herself from the sticky honey. Cara, why are you laughing? Asked Mrs. Cornelia in disgust as she pulled some of the thick, sticky liquid off her face and threw it to the floor. Are you responsible for this? She demanded, whilst trying to wipe off more of the sticky honey from her wings. Cara couldn't stop giggling and screamed in between tears of laughter. Mrs. Cornelia, your antennae are stuck together. You look so funny like that. Mrs. Cornelia's face turned bright red from embarrassment. She wiped her antennae repeatedly with a cloth until all of the honey had been removed and her antennae had finally become unstuck. Of course you are responsible for this, Cara, she remarked. Who else would do such an awful thing? I am disgusted with your behaviour. But Mrs. Cornelia, I just wanted to make our flying lesson more fun, exclaimed Cara. By now, Mrs. Cornelia was extremely cross. I beg your pardon? She shouted, glaring at Cara. Will you stop trying to be the class clown? Ignoring the teacher, Cara merely continued to giggle as she watched her classmates desperately trying to get up off the floor, only to fall back down again. Cara, this is not funny, screamed Mrs. Cornelia at the top of her voice. And waving her arms and legs around in a frenzy, she snapped, Can't you see the mess that you've made? After composing herself somewhat, Mrs. Cornelia finally said, Oh, I'll have to deal with you later, Cara. My number 1 priority right now is to help all of the little cockroaches that are stuck to the floor and can't get up by themselves. But in the meantime, I like to scrub all of the honey off the floor at once, and I expect the floor to be spotless by the time you're finished, young lady. The teacher helped the little cockroaches get up off the ground and clean themselves up, while Cara scrubbed the floor clean. Finally, after quite some time had passed, Mrs. Cornelia was able to resume with her flying lesson. But firstly, Mrs. Cornelia had some unfinished business to attend to, and staring intently at Cara, she said. "I would like you to go and sit in the corner of the room and think about your behaviour, whilst the rest of you can take up your positions and practice taking off once again. Hopefully, this time we should have no further interruptions. Ready, everyone? 1, 2, 3, and up we go," she instructed, as they all took off into the air, including Mrs. Cornelia. In the meantime, Cara sat in the corner and thought about her behaviour. But she didn't really have much time to think about it, because the bell rang for recess. Cara did decide, however, that playing pranks on the other little cockroaches in her class was so much fun that she found it quite hard to stop. She could always try to be a better student tomorrow. Chapter 8. Cara goes home early. During recess, Clarabelle and Clovis were playing with a ball and appeared to be having lots of fun together. Walking over to them, Cara decided to join in. She really wanted to play with them, but they totally ignored her. They treated Cara as though she didn't exist. After a while, they began to whisper things about Cara to each other. They wouldn't pass her the ball, thinking that she would probably ruin their game somehow. Cara walked away sadly and went to sit by herself. She watched the other little cockroaches laughing and playing together. Everyone seemed to be having so much fun, except for her. Cara felt so lonely and was relieved when the bell finally rang to go back to class. Cara was told by Mrs. Cornelia to return to her spot at the back of the room, and she was still not allowed to participate in the flying lesson. So whilst no one was watching, Cara quickly pulled a piece of bark off a log and tearing it into a number of strips. As quietly as she could, Cara took a single strip and chewed it in her mouth for a while. She watched as Clovis flew past, poking his tongue out at her, spitting out the chewed-up strip of bark, and using her antenna as a slingshot, she aimed it at Clovis and fired. "What was that?" she asked, rather startled, as he flicked the soggy ball from his left cheek. Mrs. Cornelia, who was flying towards Clovis, glared down at Cara. "Mayday! Mayday!" squealed Cara as Mrs. Cornelia and Clovis collided in midair. They both came crashing down and landed in a heap on the ground. Cara burst out laughing. Mrs. Cornelia quickly scrambled to her feet and, walking over to Cara, saw the strips of bark lying all over the floor. "What's all this?" she demanded, staring at the bark. But Cara remained silent. "Well," continued Mrs. Cornelia, beginning to raise her voice, "actually, Mrs. Cornelia, I was just having an early lunch," replied Cara. All of the little cockroaches in the class giggled, except for Clovis, who was still visibly upset by the incident. "Cara, wipe that smirk off your face right now, young lady," shouted Mrs. Cornelia. "I want you to clean up this mess at once and make sure that you see me at home time," she added. "I will not put up with this kind of behaviour." But before Mrs. Cornelia had a chance to finish her sentence, she began to panic. when she suddenly heard loud noises close by. "Look, what's under there? Look, what's under here?" shouted Thomas while digging a tunnel in the sandpit. Thomas was a little boy who attended the school, and he liked to play in the sandpit with his friends at lunchtime. "Run like cockroaches! Run!" yelled Mrs. Cornelia to the class. "Everyone go home at once," she called out desperately. All of the cockroaches ran in different directions as the boys chased them, trying to catch one of them. Cara ran as fast as she could and made it home safely. "Cara, you're home early," said Mrs. Cockroach in surprise. "You have not been expelled from this school already, have you?" "Oh no, Mother, of course not," she replied. "I love going to this school. It's so much fun." "That's nice to hear, dear. I'm really proud of you, Cara," replied Mrs. Cockroach, smiling at her. "I do believe that you're trying your best to change your behaviour and to become a better student for once." Cara rolled her eyes, but luckily Mrs. Cockroach didn't notice. Mrs. Cockroach gave her daughter a big hug and said, "By the way, dinner's almost ready. Come and help me in the kitchen, will you?" "Do I have to?" replied Cara, frowning. At that moment, a sour look suddenly appeared on her mother's face, but she said nothing. Mrs. Cockroach walked away, sighing deeply. Cara smiled. She was happy that she didn't have to help her mum after all, and quickly scuttled off to play by herself.